Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. All righty. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Still Growing in Grace. It's a great morning today. We are at the end of September, and I looked at the weather forecast for the next 10 days. It's going to be hot. It's going to be great. My wife's not going to be happy. She loves the cooler weather. Oh, man. So today we have a very interesting topic. Richard, Murray, and I were chatting about this topic of divorce and finding a hope-filled perspective. And the reason this topic was triggered as I'm speaking through the Sermon on the Mount on my Sunday morning messages, and we hit Matthew 5, where it talks about there's no room for divorce unless it's just adultery and stuff like that. Like it's, on the surface, it's pretty clear. However, it's not. And for me, it took a number of trusted people in my life to even open the door to understand there may be other perspectives on this topic. And so that's what today's discussion and conversation is about. I didn't really prep Richard on the conversation, so he and I are circling the airport on this topic, and there's a lot of really neat points that are being made. But my goal for this one is to find hope, because there are some folks who are either being guilted by loved ones who are Christians and making them feel awful for being divorced, or they somehow feel they've done something wrong when it's likely needed and it's done. So what can we do with this? And so I thought maybe some history, some background on this topic would be good. You can listen to my Sunday morning message if you want, because I touch on it. But there's a lot of really good resources out there on this. So let's just listen to this conversation. If you have a friend that's struggling with this divorce thing, I think this is a touchy one, and we're not covering all the bases on this conversation. You can't in half an hour. So I just want to share it with you because I thought it was fantastic. So here we go. You're laughing at me, boy. Oh, man. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Still Growing in Grace. Richard's making fun of me because I make fun of him more often because we got sticky fingers and the buttons mess up on her. We just have a lot of fun with tech, and we got to stay relaxed, right?
That's right.
Right. So just make sure you look over here. And
well, you never make it. Oh, okay. He's pointing his finger because I always look at the wrong thing on my phone. So
it's so funny. Anyway. You need a sticky note with an arrow there. That's funny.
Well, he's, it's like, what is the term? I'm disadvantaged. He watches out for me.
I do my best. Hey,
this way, Richard. This way.
I love it. That's so fun. So I asked Richard to have a conversation with me about something I preached on Sunday. That Hope Fellowship is tied to Still Growing Grace in a really neat way. I get to cover topics here in this program that I can't really cover on Sundays with great depth because it's just too deep, and there's more of a family, and there's people in the community that listen in. So it's just not the right place for some of the heavy duty stuff, but this is. And so I was talking in Matthew chapter 5, walking through Sermon on the Mount. And it's because of you, Richard, that I'm going through Sermon on the Mount. And you said it's one of your favorite pieces in the New Testament. I don't know. Is that true? I forget how you phrased it.
Oh, it absolutely is. The Bible, strictly on a literal level, if you just surface reading, does appear to contradict itself so many times on different aspects and different nuances and all. But but when you talk about passages that are clearer than other passages which don't have any elbow room, passages in which Jesus is stringing together thoughts instead of trying to deconstruct our thinking, but he is speaking clearly. All right. A lot of what Jesus said, he was speaking, and you can understand it, but it takes a lot of thought. But there are certain passages that just have that mystical glow on them that are just clear. These cannot be read two ways. They can only be read one way. And you can rest assured it's always going to be about love. It's always going to be about tenderness. It's always going to be about kindness. And to me, the 10 most important passages, the most important passage, but it has 10 verses, is Matthew 5:38 through 48, which
That's
is
next
smack
Sunday.
dab in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. But that is where Jesus defines the nature of his Father, and the nature of his Father. What makes his Father perfect is that he loves and he blesses enemies. It's in how he treats enemies. And you cannot read that passage, internalize it, and ever be the same again. That passage, every time someone might show me a passage where somebody's blurting out violence or blurting out retaliation or blurting out anger, and then that passage it tethers me to the divine nature. And so that's why it means personally, it means so much to me, because we all need to be tethered. Like Michael Harden, when you and I were talking the other week, he said, we all cherry pick verses. The challenge is to cherry pick the best verses that honor the divine nature the most.
Yeah. I just saw a quote from Brian Zahn that said, if we fail to love political enemies, we fail to love our enemies and fail to follow Jesus. And I thought, oh boy.
That's
rubber hits the road,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. And it's amazing how we can, the very thing that says to do when somebody challenges us on this passage, we can get angry and say, it does mean that,
Well, you just finished saying that there's only one way for some of these passages to read it. And boy, that can be very subjective, because what I covered on Sunday was you can't get divorced, or if you do get divorced, it's only for the sake of adultery. And that sounds pretty black and white to me, for a quick reading, a scan of the actual words of the English translation. One thing I touched on Sunday that seemed to be appreciated by the folks that were part of my congregation then was the word divorce is not the same word divorce as we have today necessarily. There's a deeper meaning that it could actually mean send away, abandon. It's not just the quick divorce that we have in our legal system today. I don't know if I'm sure you've expanded on that, but there was more a very unique way of seeing this, where a guy would send her away without actually divorcing her. And then if people marry her and she wasn't really divorced, that's adultery. That's kind of a context here. This is about the abuse of people and the abuse of power. And he was calling them on the carpet for it. And so I remember Brian Stiller used to be kind of a Canadian leader of the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. He said divorce is a gift of grace. And then he finished the sentence, to the victim. There is room here, and we need to see that there's more to it than just divorce is wrong, God hates divorce. So I wanted to see what you kind of heard in your journey and what you've studied in that text and other parts of the Sermon on the Mount that are really exciting to you. But that's my cherry picking one. I would love to hear your lens on,
sure,
because I think it's an important one.
Well, you basically gave the answer, but it is something we can amplify on, which is the idea that divorce means. We have to understand that when they were talking about divorce, it was within the terms of a theocracy. In other words, this was not a government religion diversion type of thing. It was God ruled. They believed that this was everything in the society was basically not political, but it was all they thought. And I think Jesus is pretty clear they didn't exactly walk in that. Yep. But in a theocracy, and in the particular theocracy and the culture that they were in, to divorce women were already disadvantaged, just in terms of their opportunities, in terms of equality. So when the woman was put away, she was actually, you were crippling her. You were ostracizing her. You were putting the scarlet letter on her. You were basically sending her away as though she were a piece of property. That's the cultural, and that's a culturally barbaric tendency or a dynamic. We have plenty of those. We have plenty of those today. So here, to me, the question is, today people get married. This has become Caesar's law. Marriage as we see it today has to be according to Caesar's law. And by Caesar, I mean the government's law.
Yep.
The law of marriage, the law of divorce, the law of equitable division of the property. It's called no fault divorce today, that all we have to do is allege that the marriage is irretrievably broken, and that's grounds for the divorce. It's legal today.
Yep.
It was different. Whatever they're talking about, it's not the same institution that it is today. And I'm giving you that strictly on as a lawyer, just on a it's one thing to be married under United States law or the law of Canada or the law of Georgia and divorce under that same law. It's another to say that everything the Bible says about, what about the rules about slavery?
Yeah.
That the Bible has and other institutions. We have evolved past that. Humanity has evolved. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that a lot of what comes out today is necessarily spiritual or is necessarily blessed. I'm not saying that, but there has been an evolving sensibilities in certain areas, and we need to at least have a recognition that cultural mindsets include hive minds, rightly or wrongly. Social mores, social judgments that society makes or doesn't make. So it's to sit there and talk about divorce. We need to be talking about, are we talking about the same institution?
Yeah.
And I don't think we are. I don't think that the biblical cultures of divorce, there has been a change in mindset and in the human mindset. Now, having said that, to me, on a personal level, I think, even if you try to say, okay, well, we'll change all that. Now women, they're not put out. They're not, children aren't orphaned. They're not put out in the wilderness. They're not doing all that. They're not ostracized. Then you remove that stuff away. Then what are we left with? And I love what Paul said when he's talking about marriage. And, Paul and Jesus gave each spoke some different grounds about divorce. Paul seemed to say that if you were abandoned or mistreated or maltreated, there's the divorce is there. Jesus didn't say a whole lot about it. He makes that statement there, but he also said this, that if any of you lust after another person, that you've committed adultery in your heart. Now, who wouldn't fit that bill? If our minds were put up on a movie screen during the entire course of our marriages, who wouldn't have fallen into that?
We're all walking around with patches on our eye.
I know. But if we're going to go around getting hyper technical,
yep.
And that's why we've got to move away from the technicalities of it, because I'm not even offering that as a causation or as a reason. I'm just saying this is a hyper technical area when people start judging other people about it and shaming them. And I mentioned to you earlier, David Bentley Hart. He has written about this and showing that the early church, if you look closely, the early church allowed divorces. There were just marriages that didn't work, and there was some different synods and different decrees put forth, and some were more stricter than others. But it wasn't unheard of that it was fairly common for divorces in the first few hundred years of the church. And I think if we're honest, there are marriages. I didn't even get to what I was saying about Paul. I love what Paul said when he said God has called us to peace. He's talking about whether a wife should stay with a husband, and that sort of thing. But it's like his sort of escape clause at the end of it was God has called us to peace. God doesn't want anybody laboring and suffering and dying in a marriage. He just doesn't. Yep. There are certain marriages that can push through, and it's a tragedy when any divorce happens. But even if you go to the biblical language, what God has put together, let no man pull apart. Well, I can't tell you that when I was young, God brought me together with who I married. Okay, I'm just I didn't know God at the time. I didn't I didn't pray. She didn't pray. We just it seemed right. Now, I would say that it's important now. and I was married for 38 years, and that's a very long time. And she's a wonderful person, and I love her, and I will always love her. But in terms of the Lord's blessing on the thing from the beginning, I think we need to be honest that can we say that God brought us together? A lot of people don't come together in the faith like that. They they may not even know the Lord. She and I came together at a time when we just really liked each other and we were attracted to each other. And, we were very young. And so it's not, I would love for everyone to be able to say God brought us together. God has put us together, and no man's going to be able to pull us apart. But that's not.
Do we even need that kind of language?
No, I'm hitting this from different angles. I don't think we do need that type of language.
Yeah.
But I do. It would be nice to believe that God, to actually prioritize Him and in that relationship, and start off from a place of praying together, of talking about the Lord together, of growing together spiritually. That's what we take away from it, not some puny rule, that we're using to try to cancel
all the Bible college guys are telling the girls, "Hey, the Lord told me that you're the one for me." So this is where the God brought us together garbage drives me nuts, because I'm not sure God does bring us together and that we can boast about it or lay credit to that. I think we need to learn Christ in us in the relationships that we've been exposed to. Some are going to go well, some are not. And we just can't over religionize it. I don't know.
That's good. That's a good way of looking at it. That when God, it's almost like you need to change the verb that God continues to bring us together.
Yeah. So even back when Jesus is confronting this stuff, he's not even confronting marriage and divorce. He's confronting the abuse of how quickly they were divorcing and getting rid of the women. That's what he was confronting, because they tried to drop the law of righteousness to an attainable level with their rules that they could actually attain. And Jesus says, no, back up to impossible. Bring it back up to impossible. You cannot do righteousness, and here's how you're playing the games. I'm calling you out, and he's saying you're trying to bring the law down. Well, I'm bringing it back up to impossible. I'm here to fulfill it fully. You can't do it, but I can, and I am, and I will. And so when the divorce thing comes up, I see it's a compassion. This is the love of God speaking to shaming, messaging, and behavior, saying, no, I'm going to go in, dive in. I'm going to sit there with you. I'm going to pull you all out, because I'm not about shame. I'm about healing from it. And I am not for any system that promotes the shame and separation and hurt and pain. That's what I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I lost you there.
Oh, that's fine. It's okay. You're still there. So that's good.
Okay.
But anyway, I basically, I think what Jesus was saying is, look, when I'm speaking about this divorce, you're trying to make it a human allowable thing. And I'm saying, no. This is about how you've distorted the intent. Like, even think of God. God, we just lost him. He's going to come back in just a moment, because that's what Richard does. And this is the button pushing thing. It's kind of been fun. But let me just, before Richard comes back in, the whole idea of this divorce, even the dowry thing, some guys were letting go of their women and not paying back the dowry, which is what the law, one of the laws was, you got to pay that back. Well, they're not going to pay that back. So what about that? So you can start to see motivation for putting away and leaving people and women penniless and helpless. That's not what grace does. Jesus does not put out people. He rescues. He dives into the mess, into the pain, to bring healing and hope. I think it's pretty cool. Richard will be in just a second. I know he's going to hit click and come right back in. So, but anyway, I think this is such a big topic. I'm not divorced, so to me, it's important to hear from those that have gone through that. So, sorry, Richard. Oh, here he comes. So I was just saying that I've not been a part of a divorce. Richard has been exposed to it. So to me, my lens is one thing, but I've been around many people who have. And so I just don't want the religious world pounding you can't, when really there is so much room for it not to be a pain thing or an abusive thing of, hey, quickly, flippantly divorce. But if there can't be peace, like you were saying, there has to be an outlet of grace. And that's what I've seen.
It's shameless orthodoxy. And I think that is such a beautiful term, shameless. It's in our human nature to shame people.
Yeah.
And this is already difficult enough. Divorce is already difficult enough. And we come in without, you know, I posted an article on Facebook today about tonal Bible reading. And the idea behind tonal Bible reading is, you know, there are languages that are tonal in nature, like Chinese is tonal in nature. And so that you hear people, it's the tone they use affects the meaning of their words. It's
Yeah.
not, they don't go by the surface. You don't know what somebody means until you hear their tone of voice. It actually changes the meaning of the words. And it's much more guttural, and you hear, you know, the people really coming up, you know, especially the Asians are really big on that. You know, they speak deep from the gut, but it's because it affects the meaning of their words. And I think that we're tone deaf on these types of
Mm.
issues. You know, we're reductionist in our thinking, and that's what I'm seeing. And I've been this way. I've seen that my own thinking about things has been reductionist, which means you oversimplify it to either black or white. If
Mm.
marriage shows you anything, it's not black or white. There are so many shades of gray, and in the gray there are times when it's just not solvable. There's a point of no return to it, and
Yeah.
that's because of a lot of different reasons: because of free will, because of past hurt, because of future fears. I mean, there's so many things that are mixed into it. And it just tells somebody, well, you just need to trust God, brother. Just hold on tight, brother. When you don't know what the person's been through, what they've suffered, where they're at, the anguish that they're in. You know, there's grace, like you say. I mean, it's your favorite word, your term. Everything you do is couched in grace from some angle. You know, you love that word. You tether yourself to that word, which is a pretty good word to tether yourself to. It's just we need to be humans with each other. We need to be empathetic and understand. And there are decisions that aren't, you know, they aren't really our business. You know, we can be there. We can pull up alongside somebody. We can try to comfort them if they need it. But if they're not looking, if they've got to follow their faith, and it may be different than our faith on it. All right, but we've got to be there and be an asset to them, whether it's an asset to comfort them, whether it's an asset not. You know how many people that go through a divorce feel that ostracization, you know, in the wake of it. You know, they feel that you know, and I've struggled with some of this. You know, the condemnation, the shame of it. It's already on its own has
Yeah.
to carry that kind of baggage. And when we come together and people, you know, that you've known and been close to and been with their tragedies, that's the time when you need to be with them to help,
Yeah.
you know, to help them in theirs. There's a James Taylor song where he, you know, it's that's why I'm here, and he starts talking about different situations where he helped someone out. And you know, in the wake of a divorce, he helped, you know, he calls up and he checks on them, and he does that sort of thing. And by the end of the song, you're just weeping, you know,
Mm.
that's what we're here to help each other get through these traumas that we all, you know, that we all go through. There's people who remain in marriage who are traumatized, and they're traumatized daily,
Yeah.
and they're so hard-hearted, and they're so numbed out that they're dying on the vine. And
Yeah.
we need to be sensitive to that. Now, should we tell people to get divorced? No, heck no. But we need to be there for them to help them feel better. You know, that's our calling is to help people feel better. And
What
I
kind
don't
of
mean
No, but for those that are so anti and legalistic about divorce, I like to remind them that God kind of invented it. He started it. He divorced Israel. He put a bar up that people forget. So wait a minute. He says he hates divorce. Yes, but he did it, and he taught them a lesson. Like, it's just if we overthink it and try and be right versus loving, that changes everything. That's where the tone matters.
and it's just there's just nuance to it, you know.
Yeah.
And God, that's why I think it's the best line in the Bible. God has called us to peace. You
Uh,
know, we'll keep going in circling, endless, obsessive circling in and out. Should I, shouldn't I? Should I, shouldn't I? With this or that or that. And it's maddening. But you know, at the end of the day, God loves us. He's not going to actually, you know, the divorce language is just rhetoric. You know, it's just rhetoric in the sense that an Old Testament rhetoric, you know, at that. So I mean, it's not this whole thing is about surviving. It's about learning to love. It's about learning to co-parent. You know, parents who do get a divorce and all that. But there's life on the other side. There's life if you stay in the marriage, there's life. If you leave the marriage, and how dare we tell people your life is over if you do that, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life? You're cursing. You're cursing their lives by saying that kind of thing.
So I'm
And
exposed to the opposite side where no, you cannot divorce because the Bible plainly says so. You need to stay in that abusive relationship. You need to stay in that horrific place. And that's the part where I'm thinking, wait a minute, even the biblical rules for what's allowed, there's a leaving that's happened emotionally in couples that nobody addresses, and there has been a departure that is a permission if you need to find one biblically or legally. But there's abuses on both sides, and I want to give freedom and I want to give love. I want to make sure those that if you're in a relationship and it's difficult, get professional help. Usually you can find good help if both are willing. Sometimes it's not going to work, but there are places where individuals that I've met, they need to get out, and they need to get out fast. And that's not easy to talk about, because if you play the game of the Bible plainly says, we suddenly have a problem. We have a rhetoric problem. And so I want to use Jesus' rhetoric. Love has to be the foundation of this. There has to be a more hope-filled perspective on this topic. And we can't do it in a short program like this, but there is and are answers, like David Bentley Hart's article on that. I don't know where you can find that, or was there anything from that there's a nugget of truth you can encourage us with?
well, that's where I really got the idea and saw the idea that the institution of marriage is different. It's an entirely different thing today than it was in biblical days. All right, because of the cultural mores, because of it was very misogynistic. It was very unequal in terms of how what happened in the wake of it. The woman was shamed, and there wasn't really anything for her, and she had nothing. And it's the effects of it were so different, which is why it would be easy to understand why Jesus or anyone in his time period would want to make sure that. I mean, what is it that James says, that undefiled religion is taking care of the orphans and the widows, and I'm sure that would be the divorcees too. Those who have been, for whatever reason, don't have any masculine cover in their life, which in that culture meant a lot. But again, I mean, you look at the divorce laws of the land; they're there to protect. That you can't get away, you can't shun somebody out of your life.
Yep.
I mean, I understand you may get a bad judge or something like that, maybe, but the laws say that you split it equally. The law says that each party's entitled to it, and that in many cases the husband has to continue to pay the wife's support, child support, but also alimony. I mean, Caesar's this institution we have is not like that institution.
Yeah.
Now and that's not to say that it's okay. But even our laws they don't just let you go down to the courthouse and get divorced. I mean, you got to file stuff. If you have kids, you have to go through a co-parenting seminar, at least where I practice law. I mean, you have to they make it difficult. Some states make you wait a year. Some states, say you can't take your divorce final for 6 months or a year, type of thing. So even there's some restraints even within Caesar's view of it. But we, I think at the end of the day, if we're in an organic relationship with somebody, even if it's damaged, I think in terms of we need to give them some elbow room to realize this is a decision only you can make.
Yes.
And I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to be your friend no matter which way you go on this. And I don't understand all that you've been through, but I know you do. But if they ask us for questions, if they ask us, and they're looking for something, but there comes a point when somebody's made a decision and the divorce has really already happened. The relationship's already broken, and they realize it. And there's nothing at that point. It's just finalizing it. So, I mean, it's just such a complex, such a complex, fissure that happens between two people.
So why did Jesus bring that up in the Sermon on the Mount? He's hitting some pretty big topics. So obviously that was a cultural one that was being abused or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good question. I don't. My only point in the thing was really that when he said divorce, the definition of divorce, the definition of marriage and divorce, and the respective rights of both parties. Knowing Jesus, he always sides with the victim, but he still loves the oppressor.
Yep.
And in marriage, if we were to be honest, in those days, the male was the oppressor a lot of the time. It was the male's testimony. It was the male's sending her, as if we could send a person away.
I know.
You know, I mean, how caveman is that?
So a cultural lens is critical in understanding the text that we see in our English translation, right?
Yes, and we can see the same thing, you know, if we go into other areas of sexuality and things like that. If there is a shift in the cultural perception of something, I think that we have to at least factor that into it.
Yeah.
All right. Things, and I get back to the slavery things here. Well, I mean, you know, are we going to follow, you know, the slavery rules? Are we going to follow, you know, there's a place in there that lets the man divorce the wife for being a bad cook, you know, ruining some food. You know, I mean, come on, we don't need the Holy Spirit to know something's not right with that. You know, so,
I'm looking.
That would be my thing, is we have to bring our conscience into it, and that's what I meant by the tone deaf thing. Our conscience is what brings the tone to this. And if we slow down and bite our tongue and not judge and condemn and shame a situation, but instead just pull alongside it if they want us to. If they're looking for help, if they're looking for comfort, we comfort them with the comfort that we've been comforted with, you know. And if where I'm at now, I can comfort people, I hope, that are going through a divorce, because I've been through one. But for 38 years, I comforted people who didn't get divorced.
I run and ask people to not go to their pastor for counseling on this, because it's going to be a very different answer than a professional trained psychotherapist or counselor or marriage therapist that can actually deal with these practical things, because it's going to be totally different answers. Your lens matters, right? So I would rather go to somebody else who's actually gone through it for some advice, right? But if it's just because they think they have an authority, then I got a problem with that.
Well, you know, there's a line in The Matrix. You know how much I love The Matrix movies.
I love The Matrix. One of my favorite series.
You know, but there's a scene in there where Neo's talking to the Oracle, and he's trying to figure out, because she speaks in riddles, much like Jesus did a lot of the time. And he said, I'm here to make a choice. And she says, no, you've already made it. You're here to understand your choice.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
And I think when it comes to this area of marriage, I think that people make their choice. They make their inner resolve on it even before they realize it. And they need to understand that, I mean, I know that in my situation, I'd made it beforehand. I just didn't realize it until I could understand what I'd made. And that's just this type of decision making is, can people do it hastily? Yeah, sure, they can do it hastily. I'm not, you know, and that's why we put guards and restraints, and, you know, we don't fly off the handle. We don't, you know, we do urge caution. Even Caesar does that, you know. Caesar urges caution with divorce and that sort of thing. But at the same time, people, and I know you've seen, and people can get resolute on this thing. They've made up their minds. So when they make up their minds, then, you know, if we love them, then we should try to be a support to them, and try to foster good relations in the divorce, and, you know, that both sides come out of it, especially if there's kids. You know, because there's as much after the divorce turmoil as there is before when kids are involved. Yeah.
I've sat through enough conversations with good friends of mine who've gone through it. It's hell. It's not easy. And you just pray for God's peace. As you were saying, you know, peace is a big theme in all this. So I'm looking forward to this Sunday when I get to dive into those verses, and I'm going to share an article or a post you gave about reading those verses in chapter 5 up to 48, 38 to 48 or something like that, whatever it was, but to see it backwards. I'm going to share that on Sunday. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that word for word.
Yeah, because verse 48 says, therefore, be you perfect, you be perfect as your heavenly Father's perfect. Well, what's the therefore? And it's the previous 10 verses, and it's just cool. It totally rewires you. And you know, and let me just say one other thing about divorce. Is it a mistake to get a divorce? It can be a mistake to get a divorce, but that's not really the issue. The issue is God help us move past mistakes.
Yep.
Or does he let the mistakes, or is he fine with it crippling us and for the rest of our lives and knocking our knees out and keeping us from progressing? And who's to ultimately say what's a mistake and not a mistake? It's a tragic, no matter what happens, it's tragic.
Yep. The
but
collateral damage is always painful.
Right. And then on the other side of the scale is the internal damage that's being done by remaining in the relationship.
Yep.
If it's toxic, abusive, non-loving, numbing, numbing is the worst. Numbing is the way people can numb themselves from the pain. But as they numb themselves, they become dead. They become dead to anything.
Oh.
And that's you don't hear a lot about that. And it's one thing if they're being physically abused. And obviously, Paul was pretty clear, on that kind of stuff. If someone's being physically abused or neglected or not taken care of. But what about just the simple situation where there's where numbness and the indifference there, and the couple never talks, they never have any meaningful communications. They're just
empty,
live empty and living next to each other. That is as traumatic and debilitating and tragic as any other resolution of this, whether it's staying or going.
I know you mentioned, physical abuse, but I saw a meme the other day, and I know, according to meme, just kidding, but this was really powerful. It says, all abuse is physical. Verbal abuse is physical. And you may say, how is verbal abuse physical? Because it's internalized physically. It physically affects the emotions, the stress, the hormones, everything inside any body. So when we try to separate abuse and say, well, physical, we clearly know, but you know what? The emotional abuse is also there, and they're pretty equal. One's more visible than the other. So I think they're so connected, and that meme bluntly put the connection together that in a way that I'd not read before. I thought was really good.
Yeah, and words are compared to swords throughout Scripture. I mean, and it's you can say that's a metaphor. Well, some metaphors are also based in literal truths. Yeah. And the words, words kill. I mean, there are people who are crippled by words that were spoken over them as children, the rest of their lives in a particular area.
I know about that. I'm one of them. Well, I'm looking forward to the... All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. It got cut off there at the end. I think we had a tech glitch that finished that up. But really good conversation, and a topic that is not talked about a lot. And so I hope you found some hope in that. We might come back and do a follow-up on that conversation because there are some more angles to kind of revisit on that. And if you have walked through that journey yourself, you know much better than I do of the turmoil and the anguish with that. And I've sat with friends it's been rough, but it's the shame and guilt that a religious lens can put on that I am running from, because I don't want that to be the message that people hear. I want them to know that Christ welcomes you and embraces you. And even if it was a decision you had to make, or one that you made by accident, if it was by accident, it doesn't matter. There's grace in all of those decisions, and there's hope in all of them. So anyway, there we go. That was a really unique topic that I didn't expect to dive into. So until next time, I hope you have a fantastic week. Thanks for watching. Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.